Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a second. We're going on a trip, but we aren't going to a nice beach, and we're definitely not going to a modern city.
No, somewhere a bit more pungent.
Exactly. I want you to imagine you are walking through London, but not the London you might know today. There are no black cabs, no red double-decker buses, no shard piercing the skyline.
None of that.
We are dropping you right into the year 1600.
And it is a completely different world. It's almost alien compared to what we know now. It's a real sensory overload.
Absolutely. The first thing that hits you is the smell. I mean, it is an assault on your senses. You have the smoke from thousands of coal fires just clinging to the air.
Everywhere. And then you've got the smell of the River Thames, which, let's be honest, was basically an open sewer at the time.
Yeah, no getting around that. You have the smell of unwashed bodies, rotting vegetables in the street, and maybe roasting meat all mixing together. And then there's the noise.
It was incredibly loud. You have church bells ringing constantly. You have these iron-wheeled carts just clattering over cobblestones.
That sound is just inescapable.
And then you have fishwives and merchants screaming their wares at the top of their lungs because, there are no microphones and no billboards. If you want to sell a fish, you have to yell about it.
And it's dangerous, too. It's so crowded. The streets are narrow. They're muddy. And right there in the middle of this chaotic, vibrant, smelly, dangerous city, you have this incredible mix of people.
A real cross-section.
You have the absolute elite of society dukes and earls rubbing shoulders with laborers, apprentices, even criminals, and they're all heading to the same place.
They are heading to the playhouse, and that is where the magic happens. This isn't just about entertainment. It's about a revolution in storytelling. We are talking about the birth of the English Renaissance theater.
It really is. It's a moment in history where the stage became the absolute center of the universe for these people. A place where boys played queens, where grown men pretended to be kings.
And where the scenery was non-existent, but the costumes were worth more than a house. Seriously.
And that is exactly what we're unpacking in this deep dive. We're stripping away the boring textbook dates and that dusty vibe from high school English class.
We are looking at a stack of research that covers everything from the architecture of the famous Globe Theater, the wooden O, to the psychological roots of the villains we all love to hate.
We've got historical analyses of the university wits, which I have to say sounds like a hipster trivia team, but was actually a group of very angry, very educated writers.
That's a good way to put it. We've also got deep literary critiques of why this era was so obsessed with blood, revenge, and ghosts.
Right. Our mission here is really to understand how this specific slice of time created what some call the master drama of the world.
We want to know why the playwrights were, biting each other's heads off, why the audiences craved violence.
And why everyone suddenly fell in love with a villain who could look you right in the eye and say, "Fraud is my greatest virtue."
I love that line. A perfect mission statement for a villain.
I love that quote. We are definitely going to get to that. But first, let's lay the groundwork. We keep saying English Renaissance theater, and people usually just say Shakespeare or Elizabethan.
Which isn't wrong, but it's not the whole picture.
Right. The sources are pretty specific about the timeline here. We are looking at a window from 1558 to 1642. Why those specific dates?
Precision is key here. 1558 is when Queen Elizabeth I takes the throne.
Yeah.
Before her, England was a mess of religious violence and instability. It was chaos.
Tumultuous, to say the least.
Exactly. When she takes over, things stabilize just enough for the arts to really flourish. So that's our starting line.
Okay, that makes sense. And 1642 is the finish line.
It is a hard stop.
Yeah.
That is the year the English Parliament, which was heavily influenced by the Puritans at the time, officially banned theatrical plays.
He just shut them down.
Shut the doors. They boarded up the theaters. They said, no more. It was the end of an era. So when we talk about this period, we're talking about that explosion of creativity that happened between Elizabeth getting the crown and the Puritans shutting the whole party down.
But even within that window, the vibe changes, right? It wasn't all just Elizabethan for, 80-something years?
No, and this is a distinction that often gets lost. It's really helpful to break it down by who was sitting on the throne. First, you have the Elizabethan period, from 1558 to 1603.
The reign of Elizabeth I.
Right, and this is the Golden Dawn. It's heroic, it's patriotic, it's finding its footing. The nation is sort of figuring itself out.
Then she dies in 1603.
Right. She had no children, the Virgin Queen, so her cousin James VI of Scotland comes down and becomes James I of England. This starts the Jacobean period.
And Jacobean comes from?
Jacobeus is just the Latin name for James. This runs from 1603 to 1625.
And the tone shifts.
Drastically. Jacobean theater is darker. It is more cynical. It's obsessed with death, corruption, and the darker side of human nature.
Okay, so if Elizabethan theater is, say, Star Wars, A New Hope.
Then Jacobean theater is Game of Thrones. It's a great comparison. It's bloody, complex, and everyone's motives are questionable.
That really clicks. And then finally,
James dies, and his son Charles I takes over. That gives us the Caroline era, from 1625 until the ban in 1642. By this point, the theaters are becoming a bit more insular, a bit more focused on the aristocracy before it all gets shut down by the Civil War.
okay, so we have our timeline. We're in that sweet spot between 1558 and 1642. Let's talk about the actual experience. If I'm a regular person in London, let's say I'm a blacksmith or a baker, and I want to go see a play, what is that like?
Well, first off, you are going to the Wooden O. That is the famous shape of the public playhouses, like the Globe, the Swan, or the Rose. They were these massive open-air and amphitheaters.
When you say open air, you mean there's literally no roof.
Well, there is a roof over the galleries where the rich people sit, and a roof over the back of the stage to protect the actors and the expensive costumes. But the middle, the yard, or the pit, that is completely open to the sky.
So if it rains?
You get wet. If it snows, you get cold. And because there's no electricity, obviously, there are no spotlights. You can't do a show at night.
Ah, so it all has to be in the daytime.
All the plays had to happen in the afternoon, usually starting around 2:00 p.m. to take advantage of the daylight.
So you have thousands of people crammed into this wooden building in the middle of the day.
And the architecture is crucial here. The sources really emphasize the thrust stage. This isn't like a movie theater where the screen is flat in front of you, and it's not like a modern proscenium theater where the actors are behind a picture frame.
What does thrust stage mean exactly?
The stage literally thrusts out into the middle of the audience. It juts right into the crowd.
So the audience is wrapping around the stage.
Exactly. You have people standing in front of the stage, we call them the groundlings, and people in galleries to the left and right. The actors are surrounded on three sides. This changes everything about how you tell a story.
How so?
It creates an incredible intimacy. In a modern theater, you can sort of ignore the audience. You can pretend the fourth wall is there.
Right. They're in the dark. You're in the light.
On the Elizabethan stage, the audience is right there. They're in the light with you. If you're an actor and you look down, you are making eye contact with a guy eating a meat pie 3 feet away.
It sounds chaotic.
It was.
Yeah.
But it was also electric. When a character like Hamlet delivers a soliloquy, to be or not to be, he isn't talking to himself. He's not staring into the void.
He's talking to them.
He is talking to them. He is asking the audience, what should I do? It turns the audience into a character. You are complicit in the action.
I love that idea. You aren't just watching history. You are in the room with it. But the sources also mentioned that there were 2 different types of theaters. We have the big public ones we just described, but also private theaters?
Yes, this is a big distinction. The public theaters, like the Globe, were for everyone. They were cheap. You could get in for a penny. That gets you into the yard.
But the private theaters, like Blackfriars, were different.
They were indoors. They were enclosed halls, basically converted monasteries.
So they had roofs and seats.
Roofs, seats, and most importantly, candles. Because they were indoors, they used artificial lighting. This changed the vibe completely.
Well, you can imagine, it's more expensive, so the crowd is posh.
Right. It costs 6 pence instead of 1. So you don't have the fishwives and the apprentices. You
Yeah.
have the gentry, the lawyers, the wealthy merchants.
A different demographic entirely.
And because it's indoors and the acoustics are better, the actors don't have to shout. The plays can be more subtle. They can be more satirical. The writing actually changes depending on which venue it was written for.
That makes sense. You play to the room. Now, let's look at the stage itself. If I'm standing there in the pit, looking up at the stage, what do I see? Do I see a painted backdrop of a castle? Do I see fake trees for a forest?
You see almost nothing. The sources are very, very clear on this. Scenery was minimal or non-existent. There were no set changes. They didn't lower a backdrop that looked like Venice.
So how did the audience know where the heck they were?
They used what we call spoken decor. The playwright had to do all the work. The words created the world.
So, give me an example.
If the scene is supposed to be in a forest at night, a character has to walk out and say, "How sweet the moonlight sleeps upon this bank."
And boom, it's nighttime in the audience's mind.
Exactly. Even if it's at 2:00 p.m. and the sun is blazing down, if the actor says it is night, the audience agrees that it is night. If the actor says, "This castle hath a pleasant seat," then there is a castle. It relies entirely on the imagination of the listener.
It's like reading a book, but with people moving in front of you. You have to build the world in your head.
Precisely. And that is why the language is so rich, so poetic. Shakespeare and his contemporaries had to paint with words because they couldn't paint with canvas.
But there is one area where they did not skimp. The sources say the costumes were absolutely insane.
Oh, the costumes were the special effects. They were everything. They spent a fortune on them.
Yeah.
The theater companies might have a bare stage, but the actors were wearing velvets, silks, gold, lace, taffeta, the most expensive fabrics you can imagine.
And this wasn't just about looking pretty. The sources bring up the sumptuary laws. This is something I find fascinating. Can we unpack that?
This is key to understanding the Elizabethan mindset. We live in a world where, you can wear whatever you want. If a billionaire wants to wear a t-shirt and jeans, he can. If a broke student wants to wear a fake Gucci belt, they can.
Right. There's no law against it.
But in Elizabethan England, clothing was regulated by law.
Actual laws about what clothes you could wear.
Yes, the Acts of Apparel.
Well,
these laws dictated exactly what fabrics and colors you could wear based on your social rank and your income.
so if you were a commoner,
You were legally forbidden from wearing purple silk. You couldn't wear gold braid. You couldn't wear certain types of fur like sable. Those were reserved for the nobility.
wow, it was a way of policing the social hierarchy, making it visible.
Exactly. You could look at someone walking down the street and know instantly where they fit in the food chain. It was a visual code. If you break the code, you could be arrested or fined.
But the theater gets a pass.
The theater was the loophole. Think about it. You have actors who were legally considered servants or even vagabonds playing kings and queens.
They had to wear the royal clothes to tell the story. A King Lear can't walk out wearing a burlap sack.
He can't. So the actors were allowed to break the law. They had a specific exemption. They were allowed to dress above their station. But, and this is the key part, only while they were on the stage.
The moment they stepped off, they had to change back.
Exactly. It created this weird transgressive space. For 2 hours, a common man could look like a king, and the audience would see it.
And the sources mention a really interesting way they got these clothes, because these fabrics were insanely expensive, right?
Astronomical. A good costume could cost more than the playwright was paid for the entire script. So the theater companies relied on the secondhand market.
How did that work?
When a wealthy duke or earl died, he would often leave his wardrobe to his servants in his will.
Which seems like a nice gesture.
It was, but it was kind of useless.
Yeah.
The servant inherits this gorgeous purple velvet doublet, but the law says he can't wear it. He literally cannot put it on without breaking the law. So what does he do?
He sells it.
He sells it to the actors. So you have this amazing situation where the audience is watching a play, and the actor playing the king might be wearing the actual coat that a real duke wore last year.
That is wild. It adds this layer of weird, ghostly realism to the whole thing.
A sanctioned masquerade of power. That's a great way to put it.
Now, speaking of masquerades, we have to talk about the other big role of the Elizabethan stage. No girls allowed.
That is the rule. It was considered immoral, unseemly, and just dangerous for women to perform on the public stage. The companies were all male organizations.
So every single female role, Juliet, Lady Macbeth, Cleopatra, was played by a guy.
Played by boy players, specifically.
Yeah.
And I want to be careful here because when modern people hear men in drag, they think of a comedy sketch. They think of a hairy guy in a dress doing a falsetto voice for laughs. That is not what this was.
The sources describe these boy players as highly skilled professionals.
They were apprentices. They were young boys, usually taken in by the theater company around the age of, say, 10 or 12, and trained rigorously. They learned to dance, they learned defense, they learned voice projection, and they learned how to move with grace.
And there was a hierarchy based on age and experience, right?
Yes. The youngest boys, who were prepubescent, had the high voices and the slight frames. They would play the young maidens, the Juliets, the Rosalinds, the Ophelias.
Okay. And as they got older?
Yeah, as they got older and gained more experience, but before their voices fully cracked or they grew a beard, they would graduate to the stronger female roles.
The Lady Macbeths, the Cleopatras.
Exactly. The tragic queens, the complex matrons. These roles required serious acting chops. And by all accounts, they were incredibly convincing. We have diary entries from people who saw these plays in the 1600s, and they talk about weeping when the heroine died. They weren't laughing. They bought into the illusion.
It really emphasizes how much the audience was willing to suspend their disbelief. They knew it was a boy, but they chose to see a queen.
It was a theater of imagination, as we said. The audience did half the work. They were active participants.
So we have the stage, the costumes, the actors, but let's zoom out a bit. Where did this all come from? It feels like this entire industry just exploded out of nowhere in 1558. But one of our sources traces the lineage back to a place I did not expect. The church.
It's one of the great ironies of history, isn't it? The church eventually became the biggest enemy of the theater, but it was also its mother.
So how did that happen?
If you go back to the Middle Ages, the vast majority of people were illiterate. They couldn't read the Bible. And the church services were in Latin, which most people didn't understand.
So how do you teach them the stories of the religion?
You act it out. The clergy started doing these little reenactments during the Mass. Whom seek ye in the tomb? Jesus of Nazareth, that kind of thing. It's called liturgical drama.
And these little skits just got bigger.
Over time, they grew into full-blown plays, mystery plays, which told stories from the Bible, and miracle plays, which told the lives of saints.
And these got popular.
Too popular, they got too big for the church. They moved outside into the churchyard and then into the marketplace. And the trade guilds took them over.
What do you mean the guilds took them over?
So you'd have the Shipwrights Guild performing the story of Noah's Ark because, they had the boats. You had the Bakers Guild performing the Last Supper. It became a civic event.
And I imagine once they moved out of the church, the tone changed.
It got secular. It got buoyant. As the source says, they started adding comedy. Noah's wife became this nagging shrew who wouldn't get on the boat. The devils became funny characters running around with fireworks.
The church can't have been happy about that.
No. They looked at this and said, okay, this is getting disrespectful, and they severed ties. So theater moves from the altar to the street.
But there's another stream feeding into this river. We have the popular street theater, but we also have this highbrow stuff coming from the universities.
Yes. This is the Renaissance part of the equation. In the 16th century, you have the rise of humanism. This was an intellectual movement that was obsessed with rediscovering the wisdom of ancient Greece and Rome.
So the students at Oxford and Cambridge are reading the classics.
They're reading Seneca, Terence, Plautus. They are analyzing the structure of Roman comedy and tragedy, and they're performing plays in Latin. Queen Elizabeth herself would visit the universities to watch them.
So you have a generation of young men who are highly educated, brilliant writers, and steeped in classical theory.
And this group gets a nickname, the University Wits.
Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, Thomas Nash, George Peele.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
These guys are the rock stars of the early London scene. But they had a problem.
What was the problem?
There were no jobs for them. The universities were pumping out more brilliant scholars than the government or the church could possibly hire. It was an intellectual bottleneck.
So you have these brilliant, arrogant, highly educated young men living in London, totally broke, with nothing to do but write.
So they turned to the public theater.
But they're not happy about it.
No, they hold their noses while doing it. They felt they were better than this. They were writing for the unwashed masses, and they resented it. And they really resented the actors.
Why the actors specifically?
Because the actors were the ones making the money. And the actors were, in their eyes, uneducated. To a university wit, the actor's just a puppet. I write the brilliant words, they'd say, you just say them.
And this tension just explodes when a certain actor decides to start writing plays himself.
Enter William Shakespeare. Shakespeare didn't go to university. He didn't learn Latin at Oxford. He was an actor. And suddenly, he starts writing plays that are just as good, if not better, than anything the wits were producing.
And they hated him for it.
They despised him. This is the context for that famous upstart crow insult. Robert Greene, on his deathbed, writes this bitter pamphlet warning his friends.
What did it say?
He says, don't trust these actors, especially that upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, who thinks he is the only Shakespeare in a country.
Wow. He literally calls him out by name. Well, almost by name. Shakespeare.
It is pure professional jealousy. Greene is saying, this guy is a fraud. He's an actor who thinks he can write. He's stealing our style. Yeah. But history had the last laugh.
It certainly did.
The university wits kind of created the form, but Shakespeare perfected it.
But the wits did give us something crucial. They brought the blood. We need to talk about Seneca and the obsession with violence.
Yes. If you want to understand why Elizabethan plays are so violent, so over the top, you have to look at Seneca. He was a Roman playwright, and he was the tutor to the Emperor Nero.
So he saw some things.
He saw some things. And his plays were intense. The sources say his plays were probably closet dramas, meant to be read aloud in a library, not actually acted out.
Why not?
Well, they're full of long philosophical speeches about stoicism.
Yes.
But they're also full of absolute horror. Seneca wrote about cannibalism, child murder, ghosts screaming for revenge from the underworld, and tyrants going mad.
And the Elizabethans took that and said, yes, let's put all of that on stage.
They took the horror and they made it visual. In Greek tragedy, violence happens offstage. A messenger runs in and says the king has been stabbed.
But not in this new English style.
In Senecan English tragedy, you watch the king get stabbed, you see the blood packs, which were probably pigs' bladders filled with blood, explode all over the stage.
And the play that started this whole craze was The Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyd.
The absolute blockbuster of the 1580s. It cannot be overstated how influential this play was. It defined the revenge tragedy. It gave us the formula.
Okay, so what is the formula? What are the ingredients?
All right. You need a ghost, usually from the underworld, who demands revenge. You need a revenger, usually a father or son, who becomes obsessed and probably goes mad with grief.
There's always madness.
Always madness. You often need a play within a play, and you absolutely need a bloodbath at the end where pretty much everyone dies, including the revenger.
And the Spanish tragedy has a scene that the sources mention specifically, the hanging body in the arbor.
Yes, this was the moment. Hieronymo, the father, walks out into his garden and finds his son, Horatio, hanging from a tree, stabbed to death. His body is just left there on stage for the audience to see. It was a shocking visual image. It cemented the idea that tragedy had to be visceral. You had to see the body.
And Hieronymo goes mad. The subtitle of the play is Hieronymo is mad again.
That became a meme of the 16th century as catchphrase. But the madness served a purpose. It allowed the character to speak truth to power. A sane man can't call the king a tyrant. A mad man can say whatever he wants.
But as the era goes on, the revenge genre gets twisted. By the time we get to the Jacobean era, we have plays like The Revenger's Tragedy. And this guy, Vindice, he is something else entirely.
Vindice is the evolution of the form. Hieronymo was a good man pushed too far by grief. Vindice is a professional revenger. He seems to enjoy it. He relishes the artistry of it.
And he carries around the skull of his dead fiancé, right?
Yes. Another skull. They love skulls. But Vindice doesn't just talk to it like Hamlet. He weaponizes it.
What do you mean?
He dresses the skull up. He puts a wig on it, puts a mask on it, and then he puts poison on its lips. Then he tricks the Duke, the man who killed her, into kissing the skull in the dark.
That is gruesome. It's almost funny in a horrifying way.
It is dark comedy. It shows how cynical the genre had become. Revenge wasn't about justice anymore. It was about the art of murder. It was about seeing how creative you could be with the violence.
And this brings us to the bad guys. We have the Revengers, but we also have the pure villains. And there's a specific type of villain that dominates this era. The stage Machiavel.
The ultimate boogeyman of the Elizabethan mind.
Now, this comes from Niccolò Machiavelli, the Italian writer, but the sources are clear that the English got him totally wrong.
Completely wrong. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a pragmatic, if ruthless, guide for rulers. He said, sometimes to keep the state stable, a prince has to do bad things. It was political science.
But that's not how the English saw him.
No, because his books weren't translated into English until 1640. They only heard about him through distorted French attacks. There was a book by a guy named Gentillet that portrayed Machiavelli not as a political thinker, but as a literal teacher of evil.
So the stage Machiavel is a caricature, a cartoon villain.
A total cartoon villain. To an Elizabethan, a Machiavel was an atheist, which was the worst thing you could possibly be. He was a poisoner. He was motivated purely by ego and greed, and he believed that the end justifies the means, but only for his own personal gain, not for the good of the state.
We have two great examples in the sources. First, there's Barabbas from Marlowe's The Jew of Malta.
Barabbas is the prototype. He is the blueprint. He opens the play in his counting house, literally surrounded by piles of gold. He looks right at the audience and delivers his mission statement.
I count religion but a childish toy, and hold there is no sin but ignorance.
He is rejecting the entire moral framework of his society in the first 5 minutes. It's shocking. And then he says our favorite line.
Fraud is my greatest virtue.
He is proud of it. He poisons an entire convent of nuns. He betrays his friends. He orchestrates mass murder. But here's the genius of Marlowe. Barabbas is a monster, but the Christians in the play are just as bad, if not worse.
They're just better at hiding it. They're hypocrites.
Exactly. The Christian governor lies, steals, and breaks promises, but he does it while claiming to be holy. Barabbas at least admits he's a villain. Marlowe uses the Machiavel to hold a mirror up to the hypocrisy of his so-called Christian society.
And then we have the king of villains, Richard III.
Shakespeare's absolute masterpiece of villainy. Richard is a Machiavellian through and through. He's physically deformed, which the Elizabethans saw as an outward sign of deformed soul, and he tells us right at the start exactly what he's going to do.
I am determined to prove a villain. No ambiguity there.
He lays his cards on the table, he breaks the fourth wall, he talks directly to us, he makes us his co-conspirators.
Right. When he woos Lady Anne, whose husband he just killed, and whose father-in-law he also killed, he turns to the audience right afterward.
And he says, "Was ever woman in this humor wooed? Was ever woman in this humor won?" He's bragging to us.
He's bragging to us, and we kind of love it. That's the scary part.
We are complicit. We want him to win because he is by far the most entertaining, charismatic person in the room. He is smart, he's funny, and he's completely without morals.
The sources mention that this version of Richard is basically Tudor propaganda, though.
Oh, absolutely. The real Richard III probably wasn't a hunchbacked monster.
Oh.
But Shakespeare was writing for Queen Elizabeth. Her grandfather, Henry Tudor, was the one who defeated Richard at the Battle of Bosworth Field. So Richard had to be the bad guy to legitimize her family's claim to the throne.
So Shakespeare turned a medieval king into a Renaissance supervillain.
And the key Machiavellian trait is that he does it all for himself. His motto is, "I am myself alone." He cuts all ties with humanity to get what he wants.
Let's shift gears to how these plays were structured, because the sources say the Elizabethans were total rule breakers. They didn't follow the classical rules of drama at all.
They were genre benders. I mean, if you look at classical theory, Aristotle, the Greeks' tragedy and comedy are separate. You do not mix them. It's like mixing oil and water.
But the Elizabethans mix them all the time.
Constantly. This is what some critics called the mongrel style. In Hamlet, right before the funeral of Ophelia, one of the saddest moments in the play, you have two gravediggers cracking jokes and singing songs.
Or in Macbeth, right after the king is murdered and the tension is at its absolute peak.
A drunken porter stumbles on stage and does a whole comedy routine about what it would be like to be the gatekeeper of hell.
Why ruin the tension like that? Why not just keep it serious?
It doesn't ruin it. It heightens it by contrast. And it's more realistic. The Elizabethans understood that life isn't just one tone. You can laugh at a funeral. Horror and humor live side by side. They wanted to capture the whole messy, contradictory experience of being human.
They also completely ignored the unities.
Oh yeah, they threw those out the window. The unity of time, place, and action. Aristotle said a play should happen in one location, a single plot, and take place within 24 hours.
Shakespeare did not get that memo.
Shakespeare laughed at that. Antony and Cleopatra jumps between Rome and Egypt constantly. The Winter's Tale is a 16-year time jump right in the middle of the play. An actor comes out and says, okay, 16 years have passed.
They just wanted scope. They wanted epic stories.
They prioritized the story over the rules. They wanted to show the sweep of history, the entirety of a life.
We also see the genres themselves shift as the years go by. The history play was huge in the 1590s, right?
Yes. Henry V, Richard II. These were plays about national identity. England was becoming a world power, defeating the Spanish Armada, and people wanted to see their own history on stage. It was patriotic and often propagandistic.
But then, under King James I, the comedy changes. We go from romantic comedy to city comedy.
This is a fascinating shift in mood. In the 1590s, under Elizabeth, you have A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's set in a magical forest. It has fairies. It ends with 3 weddings. It's incredibly optimistic.
And city comedy.
It's cynical. It's set in London. There are no fairies. There's just greed. It is about money. It is about debt. It is about tricking a rich widow into marrying you so you can pay off your loans.
So less happily ever after and more, I got mine.
Exactly. Writers like Thomas Middleton wrote these sharp, satirical plays to critique the new capitalist economy that was emerging. It reflected the anxiety of the city. London was getting rich, but it was also getting cutthroat. The theater held up a mirror to that greed.
As we wrap up, I want to hit you with a number from the sources that really, really blew my mind. We think of this era as being incredibly prolific, but the survival rate of these plays is shocking.
It is a tragedy in itself. Scholars estimate that between 1558 and 1642, about 3,000 professional plays were written and performed.
3,000. Okay. And how many do we have left?
We have the texts for 543.
That's it, out of 3,000.
That is about 18%. Imagine if 82% of all the movies made in the 20th century just vanished. That's the scale of the loss we're talking about.
Why did we lose so many? What happened to them?
Because plays weren't considered literature. They were disposable entertainment. They were scripts. The theater companies didn't want to print them because they didn't want rival companies to steal their hit shows.
So they just kept the one handwritten copy.
They kept the handwritten manuscripts. And manuscripts get lost, they get damaged, and they burn.
The Globe Theatre burned down in 1613.
And took who knows how many unique, irreplaceable plays with it. We are incredibly lucky we have as much Shakespeare as we do. If his friends hadn't decided to publish that big book, the first folio, 7 years after his death,
What would we have lost?
we would have lost Macbeth, we would have lost The Tempest, we would have lost Twelfth Night. They would be gone forever, just a title in a record book.
Wow, it makes you realize how fragile our culture is. We assume everything will be saved to the cloud forever, but things can be lost so easily.
Absolutely. The window is gone, the costumes are gone, the actors are dust. All we have are these 543 scripts.
But what scripts they are, they captured a world in transition.
They did. As the sources say, this was a time when all values, hierarchies, and forms were tested. They tested what it meant to be a king. They tested what it meant to be a father. They tested the nature of evil itself. And they did it all on a bare wooden stage in the middle of a muddy city with thousands of people watching.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. The Elizabethan theater was the pop culture of its day. It was the news, it was the editorial page, and it was the blockbuster movie all rolled into one. It was the place where society looked at itself.
To hold, as 'twere, the mirror up to nature, as Hamlet said.
Exactly. So if that was the mirror for the 1600s, what's the mirror today? Where is the stage where we are testing our values right now? Is it Netflix? Is it TikTok? Is it the comment section on a news article?
And the scarier question, will more than 18% of our stories survive for the people 400 years from now to find?
That is something to think about. Thank you so much for going on this journey with us. This has been a deep dive into the blood, the sweat, and the genius of English Renaissance theater. We will catch you on the next one.